There are days when the noise outside becomes louder than the voice within. Days when our hearts, though silent, feel heavy, weighed down by questions, regrets, and emotions we don't know how to name. Maybe you've felt it too. The restlessness before sleep, the ache behind your quiet smile, or the stillness that doesn't soothe but echoes. And yet, somewhere within us is a longing not for answers, but for peace, a yearning not to escape life, but to understand it. Perhaps what we seek is not a path forward, but a place to pause, to breathe, to listen, and to be held by something gentler than the world. Tonight, you are invited into that space. These are not just stories. They are lanterns quietly lit across centuries, passed hand to hand, from mountain monks to modern minds. Each tale carries not just wisdom, but warmth, not just truth, but tenderness. You won't find commands or conclusions here, only mirrors soft and still. So, you might see yourself a little clearer. So, take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Set down whatever you've been carrying just for now. This is your time. You are about to enter a forest of stories of rivers and tigers, of strawberries and teacups, of sorrow and stillness. Let each story speak to you not through logic, but through presence. Let them wash gently through your mind, the way wind passes through pine trees. Peace begins when we stop running, and you're already here. 1. The empty boat. There was a man named Elian who found solace where others feared silence, drifting his wooden boat down the early morning river. The water knew no urgency. The trees lining the banks whispered only to the wind. And Elian, who had once lived a life surrounded by voices, had come to love this wordless company. Each morning before sunrise, he untied his boat and let the current guide him. He didn't row far. He didn't need to. The point was not to arrive, but to dissolve. One morning, as the mist clung low and the sky turned gold, Elian saw something ahead, a shape moving slowly across the water. Another boat, silent, unlit, drawing near. At first, he smiled. A fellow drifter, perhaps. But as the boat grew closer, a seed of irritation planted itself in his chest. It wasn't slowing. It wasn't adjusting course. It was coming straight at him. "Hey," Elian called out, soft but firm, no reply. "Watch it. You're drifting too fast." Still nothing. The two boats were now mere seconds apart. Elian, his heart now pounding, stood and shouted, "Are you blind? You're going to crash." And then, thud. The boats met with a gentle but jarring knock. Elian's boat rocked, and his anger surged like a storm. But as he steadied himself and looked over, what he saw emptied him. The other boat was completely empty. No oars, no figure, not even footprints, just a vessel, drifting on its own, carried by the same current that had once soothed him. Elian sat down. The rage he felt had nowhere to go. No one had insulted him. No one had ignored him. No one had challenged or provoked him. It had all been imagined, born not from reality, but from reaction. And that realization did something strange. He laughed, quietly, at first, then deeper, not because it was funny, but because he saw himself. How quickly the mind jumps, how swiftly it fills in stories where there are none. For the rest of the day, Elian kept drifting, but something had shifted. He no longer saw the river as a backdrop for peace, it was the teacher itself. And that empty boat, it became a lesson that would return to him many times in life. Because the truth is, not every collision is an attack. Not every silence is disregard. Sometimes, the boat that hits us has no captain. It's just life, drifting, not meant to hurt us, not aimed at us, just floating. And how often do we rage at things that are empty? Traffic jams, thoughtless comments, unmet expectations we lash out, imagining an enemy. But sometimes, there's no enemy, just an empty boat, just movement. Elian would return to that river every day. But now, whenever something or someone bumped against him, he'd pause before reacting. He'd ask himself, is this boat really full? Or am I filling it with my fear, my story, my ego? And most days, he'd find that the boat was empty. So he'd smile and let it pass. 2. The strawberry between the tigers. Far in the mist-covered mountains, there lived a man named Rinnan, a solitary wanderer who walked not for destinations but for presence. Each morning, he'd set out before the sun climbed over the peaks, greeting mossy stones and singing birds as if they were old companions. One morning, while crossing a narrow trail carved into a cliffside, the wind carried a low, guttural sound to his ears, the unmistakable growl of a tiger. He froze. Slowly, he turned, and there, emerging from the dense forest brush, was a tiger, sleek, powerful, and staring straight at him. The world slowed. Rinnan's instincts screamed, without thought. He ran not toward safety, but away from fear. The path narrowed, turned, and finally ended at the edge of a cliff. With no time to ponder, he spotted a vine hanging from above and swung himself over the edge. His hands wrapped tightly around the rough cord as he dangled, his feet above air and death. The tiger stood above, peering down with amber eyes, silent now, patient. Rinnan dared a glance downward, another tiger waiting, pacing among rocks below. One breath, two beasts, no escape. And then, something odd. Just beside his hand, growing from the rock face, was a small plant, a wild strawberry, bright red, round, impossibly ripe. Its stem trembled in the wind. Rinnan looked at it. Then he laughed. A quiet, breathless sound that startled even the birds. Carefully, he let go with one hand, plucked the berry, and placed it gently in his mouth. It was sweet, unreasonably so, juicy, wild, vivid, as if the entire mountain had saved its last flavor for this moment. Rinnan closed his eyes. For that breath. He wasn't dangling. He wasn't between danger. He wasn't lost. He simply was. And that, strangely, was enough. Later, perhaps minutes, perhaps hours, someone passing along the path above spotted him and threw down a rope. Rinnan climbed up, weak but smiling. Not because he had escaped death, but because he had touched life more fully in those moments than he had in many years. After that, people often asked him, "Weren't you terrified?" He would reply, "Yes, but I also tasted the sweetest strawberry I've ever known." The story became legend, but what people misunderstood was that it wasn't about bravery or luck. It was about choosing presence. We all hang from invisible vines, sometimes caught between the fears above and the threats below. We feel cornered by deadlines, illnesses, breakups, bills, aging, or loneliness. And yet, in the midst of it, there is often a strawberry, a moment with a friend, a breeze through the window, a quiet morning cup of tea. We don't need to pretend the tigers aren't there. We simply don't need to miss the fruit growing beside us. Rinnan's tale is not about survival. It's about noticing. Because sometimes the most radical act of mindfulness is to taste joy in the midst of uncertainty, to say, this is frightening, but this is also sweet, and both are true. So, the next time life traps you between two dangers, look around. There may be a strawberry waiting. 3. The second arrow. There was a woman named Mira who lived in a coastal town known for its lighthouses and storms. She had always been resilient, the kind of person others leaned on when winds blew too hard. But one day, even Mira broke. It happened suddenly: a letter, a diagnosis, a betrayal. It doesn't matter which. Pain, in any form, has the same sharp beginning. She sat alone in her kitchen, tea gone cold, staring at the wall where sunlight no longer reached. Her chest felt as if it had been pierced not with something visible, but something deep. The first arrow. She told herself it was normal. Everyone hurts. But days passed, and the wound grew. She couldn't sleep. Her thoughts circled endlessly. Why me? Why now? What did I do wrong? And soon, pain turned to shame, to anger, to isolation. She stopped returning calls. She shut the blinds. The wound deepened, not because of what had happened, but because of how she couldn't stop reliving it. One evening, Mira found herself walking without aim and ended up at the cliffs near the sea. The lighthouse stood tall, unmoved by wind or wave. There, she met an old man named Jalen, a retired mariner known to most as a quiet observer. "You look like you've been hit," he said gently. "I have," she replied, "and it won't stop hurting." Jalen nodded. He picked up a stick and drew 2 arrows in the sand. "The first arrow," he said, pointing, "is the one you couldn't avoid. It strikes without warning. Illness, loss, betrayal. Life fires it, and we feel its pain." Mira nodded. "But the second arrow," he continued, tapping the second drawing, "is different. It's the one we fire ourselves, with our thoughts, our fears, our stories. It's what happens when we keep twisting the wound." She stared at the sand. Jalen continued, "You've been struck. That's true, but you've also been reloading." That night, Mira couldn't sleep, not from pain, but from clarity. She began to notice how often she was aiming that second arrow when she replayed conversations, when she imagined futures that hadn't arrived, when she blamed herself for simply being human. And, with time, she stopped shooting. She didn't deny her pain. She didn't rush healing, but she paused in moments when she might have spiraled. She breathed instead. She named her feelings without fighting them. This is grief. This is fear. This is longing. Naming them didn't fix them, but it softened them. Months later, Mira stood on that same cliff and watched the lighthouse again. The waves still crashed. The wind still howled, but she was no longer pierced. Not because pain had disappeared, but because she no longer added arrows. The lighthouse didn't fear the storm. It simply stood, knowing its purpose was not to fight the sea, but to remain steady within it. And so Mira, too, stood. Lesson: life will always fire arrows we cannot dodge. That's the truth of being human. But how we meet that pain, how we respond, determines whether we heal or deepen the wound. The first arrow is pain. The second is suffering. We don't get to choose the first, but the second is always ours to release. So the next time pain arrives, ask yourself gently, do I really want to fire again? Because maybe, just maybe peace is learning to stop with the first 4, the mustard seed that knocked on every door. In a small, sun-drenched village where lanterns swayed gently above wooden doors, there lived a young woman named Kira. Her home was filled with laughter, herbs drying in windows, and the quiet songs of a child. Her son, Ren, had been the center of her world, curious, wild-haired, full of questions and mischief. And then, one winter morning, the song stopped. A fever came, swift and unrelenting, like a thief in the night. By the time the village healer arrived, the boy's chest was still. Kira did not cry, not at first. She simply kept holding him, whispering stories into his ear, as if her voice could tether his spirit back to earth. Her neighbors, respectful in their silence, watched as she wandered from house to house, her child still wrapped in her shawl, her eyes wide with hope. "Please," she whispered at each doorstep, "do you know someone who can bring him back? A healer, a sage, a spell, anything." People wept with her. Some embraced her. Some avoided her, too pained by the reminder of their own losses, but no one had the answer she sought. Finally, an old woman took her hand and said softly, "Go to the mountains. Seek the sage who sits under the banyan tree. He listens, even when the world has nothing left to say." Kira walked for 2 days without rest. When she found the sage, a man wrapped in simple robes, surrounded by silence, she fell to her knees and placed Ren before him. "Please," she begged, "bring him back. I'll do anything." The sage did not recoil. He didn't offer false hope. Instead, he looked at her with deep kindness and said, "I will help you, but I need one thing first." Kira's breath caught. "Anything. Bring me a mustard seed," he said, "from a household that has never known death." A strange request, but it felt like a task, something to do, something to chase. She bowed and left, clutching that thread of hope. She knocked on the first door in the nearest village. A woman welcomed her kindly, but when Kira made her request, the woman's face fell. "My sister died in the floods last year," she said, voice low. The second house. The grandfather had passed in spring. The third, a child, not unlike Ren. Kira kept walking, door after door, village after village, and with each house, she heard not just refusals, but stories. Some told of fathers lost to war, others of mothers taken by illness. One man spoke of a wife he had loved since childhood, buried beneath the plum tree outside. At first, Kira felt anger. Why is everyone broken? But then, something shifted. With each story, her grief opened not wider, but deeper. It began to feel less like a wound only she bore, and more like something woven through humanity itself. A shared language, silent but universal. When she returned to the sage weeks later, her arms were empty. "I couldn't find a single home untouched by death," she whispered. The sage nodded gently. "And now you understand." Tears finally came, but not the desperate, clinging ones. These were tears of release. Kira buried Ren beneath the old oak near her garden, placing a small stone at the head and each morning she watered the herbs that still grew there: lavender, sage, and yes, mustard. A lesson. Grief often tricks us into believing we are alone, that our sorrow is unique, our loss unmatched. But suffering, like love, touches every life. When we begin to listen, truly listen, we see that death is not a thief that singled us out. It is a quiet visitor to every home. And sometimes, the only thing that can heal a breaking heart is the echo of another breaking too. 5, maybe once, in a land where seasons whispered wisdom and rivers never rushed, lived a woman named Sori. She tended a modest orchard nestled between two hills, where peach trees bloomed like soft lanterns each spring. Her life was simple, not easy, not perfect, but quiet, deliberate. She spoke rarely and listened often. People admired her calm, but didn't quite understand it. One morning, a great storm tore through the valley. Winds howled like wolves. Trees bent. By dawn, Sori's oldest peach tree had snapped at its base. It was the heart of her orchard, the one her father had planted the day she was born. Neighbors came with furrowed brows and heavy words. "What a tragedy," they said. "You must feel cursed." Sori looked at the fallen trunk, touched the soaked roots, and softly replied, "Maybe." The villagers exchanged puzzled glances. That word again, weeks later. Workers clearing the broken roots found something unexpected: a spring, hidden beneath the soil. The water, clean and sweet, flowed gently, nourishing the trees around it. The orchard flourished as never before. "You're blessed," the villagers exclaimed. "Fortune smiles on you." Sori smiled gently. "Maybe." The villagers shook their heads. Why couldn't she just be happy in late summer, as the trees grew heavy with fruit? Sori's foot slipped on a damp stone while carrying buckets from the spring. She fell hard, breaking her wrist. The pain left her unable to harvest or prepare her preserves, the very work that kept her through winter. Again, the villagers came. Terrible luck, they murmured. Everything was going so well. Sori, her wrist in a sling, whispered, "Maybe." Autumn arrived. A fire broke out in the nearby forest, leaping over fields and devouring whatever lay in its path. Flames raced toward the orchard, but as they reached Sori's land, the fire paused. The ground was too damp. The spring had made the soil resilient, unburnable. Her orchard, unlike so many others, survived. This time, no one said anything. They just looked at her, waiting. Sori, still with her sling, sat beneath a tree and offered them tea. She didn't say, "Maybe, that time." She didn't need to. Years passed. Seasons shifted. Some harvests were good, some less so. Her orchard remained, neither a tale of triumph nor tragedy, but of rhythm, of surrender, of letting life speak in its own time. When a young traveler visited her, asking for the secret to peace, Sori didn't lecture. She led him to the edge of the spring, handed him a ripe peach, and said, "You don't always need to name things." He didn't understand. She smiled, touched the old tree stump, and added, "The peach tastes just as sweet whether you call it a gift or a loss." Lesson. We crave certainty to know if something is good or bad, right or wrong, lucky or doomed. But life, like seasons, rarely fits into such neat boxes. Maybe is not indecision. It's wisdom wearing soft shoes. It teaches us to wait, to watch, to let meaning arrive on its own breath. Because what looks like a fall may uncover water, and what burns may never have truly been yours. Let the orchard grow. Let the tree fall. Let the spring rise, and trust that even the softest fruit knows when it's ready. 6. The gift you don't take. In a coastal village where fog hugged the cliffs like an old friend, there lived a sculptor named Avon. He was known not only for his delicate hands, but for the calm that seemed to breathe through everything he touched. His workshop was filled with statues of wind-blown trees, open palms, and faces forever in mid-smile. But not everyone admired him. One man, Callan, resented him deeply. Once, a sculptor himself. Callan had lost favor in the town years ago, his work seen as too harsh, too full of rage. The more praise Avon received, the more bitterness stirred in Callan's chest. And one day, he could no longer keep it in. He stormed into Avon's shop, fists clenched, eyes narrowed. "Your piece is fake." Callan spat. "You pretend to be above us, but you're nothing. You steal admiration like a thief in daylight." Avon, who had been brushing dust from a stone figure of a sleeping child, paused. He looked up slowly, not startled, not defensive, just aware. Callan's voice grew louder. He insulted Avon's work, his character, his silence. Words flew like arrows, sharp and wild. "Still." Avon said nothing. Finally, exhausted, Callan shouted, "Say something. Don't you care what I think of you?" Avon stood, walked to a nearby shelf, and picked up a small, unfinished sculpture, a bowl, smooth and shallow. "Callan," he said quietly, "if I offered you this bowl, but you refused to take it, who would it belong to?" Callan, confused, growled, "You." "Of course." Avon nodded. "And so it is with your anger." There was silence. Not heavy, but clear, like wind through empty branches. "I see your pain," Avon said softly, "but I don't have to carry it." Callan stared at him, his face slowly softening as if something within him had exhaled for the first time in years. He didn't apologize. Not yet. But he didn't speak again either. He left, walking slower than he had arrived. Later that week, he returned, not to shout, just to sit. He brought no insults, only silence, and after a long while, he asked, "How do you stay untouched by what people throw at you?" Avon handed him a block of stone and said, "Let's find out together." Lesson. We often believe we must defend ourselves against every insult, explain every misunderstanding, absorb every emotion thrown our way. Whoa! But peace isn't found in fighting back. It's found in not picking up the weight at all. Anger is a gift we don't have to accept. When someone hands you rage, you don't have to unwrap it. When they throw sharp words, you don't have to bleed. You can simply not take it. You are not weak for choosing stillness. You are not passive for choosing peace. You are simply wise enough to know what you carry becomes yours. So, carry light and let the rest fall. 7. The cup already broken. In the quiet courtyard of a stone monastery nestled between ancient cypress trees, there lived a teacher named May. Her students admired her, not for the knowledge she shared, but for the way she moved slowly, deliberately, as if each gesture were a prayer. Every evening, they gathered for tea, not as a lesson, not as a ritual, but as a pause, a gentle bridge between day and night. One evening, as golden light spilled across the wooden table, May reached for a cup. It was a simple ceramic one, handmade, slightly imperfect, with a soft blue glaze that reminded people of morning fog. She held it in both hands and smiled. "This cup," she said, "is already broken." The students looked at one another, puzzled. The cup sat perfectly intact, smooth and whole. One of them finally asked, "Master, what do you mean it isn't broken?" May nodded. "Not yet, but it will be." She placed the cup gently before her and continued, "Maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, maybe in an instant, but one day, this cup will fall. It will crack or fade or disappear. That is its nature. And when I know this, when I accept this, I can love it more, not less." The students sat in silence, absorbing her words. The breeze moved gently through the trees. A bird called from somewhere unseen. May poured tea into the cup and lifted it with reverence. When we pretend things are permanent, we become afraid. We cling. We suffer when they change, as all things do. But if we live, knowing something is already broken, we are free. We can savor it fully, without fear. One student, a young woman named Lynn, lowered her gaze. "But if it's already broken, why care at all?" May looked at her, eyes kind, "Because that is exactly why we care." She paused, then added, "Imagine holding a snowflake on your palm. You know it will melt, but isn't that why you treasure its brief, perfect shape?" That night, Lynn stayed behind after the others left. She touched her own teacup, one she had used for months, chipped slightly at the rim. "I lost my sister last spring," Lynn whispered. May didn't reply. She only listened. "I keep pretending she'll walk through the door again, that I'll hear her laugh in the kitchen. I haven't touched her things. I tell myself they're still hers." May took Lynn's hand and placed it gently on the cup. "She was your snowflake," she said. Lynn closed her eyes, and then something unexpected happened. She smiled, not from joy, but from understanding. The next day, she walked to the river, carrying a box. She opened it, let the wind move through it, and whispered goodbye. Not because she wanted to let go, but because she finally could. Lesson: everything we love is already broken, not from damage, but from impermanence. The people, the places, the moments, all of them pass, transform, dissolve. But this isn't a reason for sorrow. It's a call to presence. When we stop resisting change, we begin to love more deeply. We stop clutching, and we start holding with reverence, not fear. So drink from your favorite cup as if it might vanish. Kiss your loved ones like it's the last time, not out of dread, but devotion. Because what is fleeting is also sacred. And the cup, already broken, still holds tea. 8. The robe without a wearer. In the heart of an old city, where alleys curled like sleeping cats and incense lingered in the morning air, lived a tailor named Eli. He was quiet, gentle, known for making robes not just with fabric, but with care, threading silence into every stitch. One day, a wealthy merchant arrived at Eli's door. His coat shimmered with gold embroidery, His voice filled the room before his body did. "I want you to make a gift," he said, laying down a bolt of fabric rich, rare silk dyed the color of crushed sapphires, for the teacher who lives beyond the northern hill. They say he wears the same threadbare robe every day. I want to give him something worthy. Eli looked at the cloth. It was beautiful too. Beautiful. He nodded slowly. He spent a week on the robe, working at dawn, resting only when stars blinked awake. When it was done, the garment glowed softly in the sunlight, elegant, flowing, perfect in every seam. The merchant returned, beaming with satisfaction. "Yes," he said, brushing his fingers along the sleeve. "Now that is a robe for a sage." They walked together to the hill where the teacher lived. The man was already sitting beneath a tree, eyes closed, palms resting upward. He looked like stillness made flesh. The merchant stepped forward, robe in hand. "Master," he said, "I offer you this as a sign of respect, a gift of honor." The teacher opened his eyes and smiled. Then he stood, walked to the merchant, and bowed deeply. "I thank you for your generosity," he said, voice like slow water, "but I cannot accept this." The merchant blinked. "But why, I already have what I need," the teacher replied, gently touching the thin robe on his body, patched, faded, but clean. To accept more would be to take from those who have less, but this is a gift. You deserve the best. The teacher smiled again. "Then give it to someone who has nothing." The merchant's face shifted confusion, then irritation, then a flicker of shame. "I hadn't thought of that." The teacher nodded. "True giving is not measured by what we give to those who already have, but what we offer to those who don't." They stood in silence for a moment. Then the merchant bowed lower than before. He turned, and without a word, walked back to the city. That evening, Eli saw him again, but this time in the poorer quarter of town, kneeling beside an old man wrapped in rags. The merchant removed the robe from its case and, with both hands, offered it to the man. Not with pride, not with display, just kindness. The man took it with trembling hands, his eyes filled with tears, not because of the silk, but because someone had seen him. Eli watched from a distance, and he smiled, not because the robe had found a wearer, but because it had found a meaning. Lesson: a gift without purpose is only decoration. Giving upward feeds ego. Giving downward feeds the world. True generosity asks not, "What do I want to give?" but what is truly needed. Sometimes, what we offer says more about us than the gift itself, but when we give not from pride, but presence not to impress, but to uplift, our hands become extensions of something greater, and even the finest robe, unworn, carries no warmth. Let your kindness be worn by someone who truly needs it. Only then does it become real. 9. The beast bowed to kindness. In a village cradled between wild jungles and wide rivers, stories of a ferocious elephant echoed like old thunder. They called him Barrow, once a gentle beast, now feared by all. No fence could hold him, no trainer could tame him. He had trampled fields, shattered carts, frightened entire families into fleeing their homes. Stay away from Barrow. Parents warned their children. His heart has turned wild, but no one spoke of why. Only the elders remembered he had once served in the royal stables, loved for his calm strength, until war came. Men in armor beat him, chained him, starved him, and used him like a weapon. When peace returned, Barrow escaped into the forest, dragging broken chains behind him, never to be touched again. Many tried to capture him. All failed, until one day. A quiet monk named Zen came to the village. He was not tall. He did not carry ropes or darts or cages, just a cloth bag of rice, a wooden bowl, and a gaze that looked through things. The villagers warned him, "He's dangerous." Zen only nodded, "So is pain." They watched in disbelief as he walked into the jungle alone. For hours, nothing. Then, a sound, the rustling of trees, the breaking of branches, and then silence. Barrow stood before him, towering, trembling. His massive ears twitched, his tusks gleamed like pale moons. His eyes bloodshot, tired, unsure. Zen did not move. He bowed, and then he sat on the forest floor, legs crossed, palms open as if inviting not obedience, but trust. Barrow lifted his trunk. He could crush this man with one swing. Instead, he sniffed the air. Zen reached into his bag and placed a handful of rice on the ground between them. Then he waited. Barrow didn't eat. He stared. And then, slowly, he sat. Too. The forest exhaled. That evening, Zen returned to the village, alone. "What happened?" they asked. I listened. He said, "Every day after that." Zen returned. He brought no tools, no commands, only stillness. He sat near Barrow. Some days the elephant ignored him. Some days he watched. Some days he inched closer. Weeks passed. Then, one morning, Barrow followed Zen back to the edge of the village. Not because he was caught, but because he was heard. Children watched from windows, hushed and wide-eyed. The elders wept softly. They remembered the elephant from their youth, how he used to help pull water, how he swayed to flute music at harvest festivals. Barrow was different now. He still flinched at loud sounds. He avoided ropes. But he walked beside Zen with a quiet dignity, not as a beast returned, but as a soul restored. And Zen, he never claimed to tame the elephant. He only said, when someone carries pain too long, they forget how to be gentle, not because they can't, but because no one is gentle with them. Lesson: not all rage is born of cruelty. Sometimes it's the armor around an old wound. We meet force with fear, forgetting that beneath the roar is often a whimper, a plea not for control, but for compassion. You cannot beat fear out of someone. You can only sit with it, patiently, until it no longer needs to roar. Like Barrow, many carry invisible chains, and like Zen, we have a choice to judge the wild, or to understand its silence. Sometimes, the most powerful act isn't to conquer the beast, but to bow before it and wait. 10. The Raft of Impermanence. 700 words. There was a traveler named Nico, weary from years of searching. He had crossed deserts that burned, climbed mountains that bled his breath, wandered cities that made promises but gave no peace. And one day, he reached a wide, rushing river. There were no bridges, no boats, only the distant forest on the other side, where birds called softly and the wind hummed like memory. That forest, something in it whispered home. So Nico gathered branches, vines, and patience. He built a raft, lashing each piece with care. For 3 days he worked, soaked and bitten by insects, driven by hope. When it was done, he pushed it onto the water and stepped aboard. The current was swift, and the journey rough. Water splashed, the raft swayed, but he held firm. And then, the far shore, green, still, alive. He fell to his knees, kissing the ground. He turned to look at the raft, waterlogged, tilting slightly, yet whole. His chest filled with gratitude. It had carried him through, but as he turned to walk into the trees, he hesitated. What if I need it again? What if the river rises? He pulled it ashore, tied it to his back. It was awkward, heavy. It scraped against branches, knocked over saplings. Birds flew off, startled, but he clung to it. I built this. I need this. This saved me. Days passed. His shoulders ached. He walked slower. Others passed him, travelers with nothing but walking sticks and open hands. They moved freely. He did not. One evening, exhausted, he collapsed beside a stream. An old woman tending wild herbs nearby saw him struggling to remove the raft from his back. "What are you carrying?" she asked. "A raft." Nico replied. "It saved my life." She nodded gently. "I see. And where are you now?" "On land," he whispered. She pointed to the water. "Then perhaps it's time to walk." He stared at the raft. It was a good raft. Strong. Trustworthy. But it no longer served the path ahead. So, with a deep breath, he untied the knots. He placed the raft at the river's edge, not with rejection, but with reverence. "Thank you," he whispered. "You brought me here, but I must go on alone." And the river, with quiet grace, took it. Nico stood taller as he walked away, lighter, freer, not because he had less, but because he needed less. Lesson: we all carry rafts, beliefs, habits, relationships, stories, things that once saved us, things that once meant everything. But the tools that bring us across one river may not belong on the next shore. Letting go isn't betrayal, it's recognition. To cling to the past, even out of gratitude, is to burden the present. And what once was helpful becomes heavy when carried too long. Ask yourself, what am I still carrying that no longer moves me forward? The raft did its job. Now, it's time to walk. 11. The lotus that feared no flame. There was once a lake hidden deep in the highlands, where fog rolled like silk and mornings unfolded like soft prayers. In the center of this lake grew a single lotus, pale, open, quiet. She was not the tallest, nor the brightest, but she was the oldest. And with age came stories. The other lotuses bloomed in the shadows of reeds, their petals timid, their voices hushed. They had heard tales of fire how, once, a spark had drifted across the lake and scorched a distant shore. Ever since, they feared the wind, feared the sun, feared even each other's brightness. But the elder lotus did not hide. Each day, she faced the sky. Rain kissed her. Sun warmed her. Birds rested on her leaves. Even when storms passed, ripping lilies from their roots, she remained not untouched, but unshaken. One young bud, trembling beside her, finally asked, "Aren't you afraid of what the elder lotus replied? The flames, the rumors, The judgment. What they say. The elder smiled. Ah, the voices of fear. She paused, then said, "Let me tell you a secret." The bud leaned in. "Years ago," the elder began, "a fire did come, not from the wind, but from words." She spoke of how the reeds once accused her of stealing the sun, of standing too tall, of daring to open when others stayed closed. "They burned me with silence," she said, "with whispers, with shame." The young bud gasped. "So what did you do?" "I stayed open," she said. "But weren't you hurt?" "Yes." The elder nodded, "But not destroyed, because I knew the fire was not mine. It belonged to them." The bud frowned. "I don't understand." The elder lotus reached a petal toward the sky, where clouds moved like slow breath. "If you let fear shape your bloom, you will never open," she said. "And if you never open, the world will never know your fragrance." The bud was silent. That night, a wind came, not fire, but fierce. The lake churned, petals scattered, shadows danced. The next morning, the elder stood tall, dew on her leaves, gold in her heart. The young bud beside her, open, just a little, but enough. Lesson: in a world quick to judge, quick to criticize, quick to misunderstand, it takes courage to bloom, to be seen, to stand tall, to shine without apology. But remember, not every fire is meant for you. Some flames are born from the pain of others. Let them pass. Let them burn out on their own. Your job is not to control the wind, only to root deep enough that you do not sway with every gust. Be the lotus, not because you are fearless, but because your truth is not afraid of flame. 12. The horn in the still wind. In a silent village carved between cliffs, where sound rarely echoed and even birds flew softly, there lived a boy named Davi. He was born during a windless season when even the grass stood frozen, and the sky felt paused. The villagers said the stillness was sacred. That silence was the mark of peace. But Davy disagreed. He loved to sound the drum of rain, the murmur of streams, the laughter of wind through trees. And most of all, he loved music. On his 12th birthday, he was gifted a horn, not a bright brass trumpet, but a long wooden reed carved by an old hermit who once played for the mountains themselves. Davy held it with reverence. That night, he climbed a high ridge and blew into it. Nothing. No echo. No note. Only stillness. He tried again the next day. And the next. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. But the wind never returned. The villagers told him to put the horn away. The world doesn't need noise. They said, learn to be still like the rest of us. But Davi couldn't. He cleaned the horn each evening, carried it on walks, whispered songs into its mouthpiece, hoping the air would one day move again. Years passed. He grew tall. The horn grew worn, and still no wind. Some called him foolish, others stubborn. But Davy kept waiting, not passively. He studied the way wind bent trees, how it kissed water into ripples, how it returned without warning, like a friend who needed space. He learned patience not from silence, but from longing. One day, after many years, he climbed the ridge again. The sky looked unchanged. The trees still stood like sentinels, but then a whisper, not loud, not fierce, a breeze, small, hesitant. Davy lifted the horn. He didn't blow hard, just breathed into it. And the horn sang, a soft, low tone like a memory long buried. It rose wrapped around stones, danced down the cliffs, and reached the village below. People stopped. They looked up, eyes wide. Some wept. It wasn't the loudest song they'd ever heard, but it was the truest, because it came from waiting, from honoring the wind's silence without giving up on its voice. Lesson patience isn't the absence of longing. It's the presence of quiet faith that what we carry inside, though unheard today, will one day find its sound. We often confuse silence with failure, stillness with defeat. But sometimes, the world is simply holding its breath, waiting to receive what we're preparing to give. And when that moment comes, if we are still holding the horn, still willing to breathe, the world will hear something it forgot it needed. So do not give up just because the wind hasn't come. The horn was made to sing, and so were you. 13. The bamboo that would not break. At the edge of a village where monsoons kissed the earth with both love and fury, a grove of bamboo stood tall, slender, and quiet. They were not the strongest trees in the forest. They had no thick trunks, no wide branches, no armor of bark. Yet, season after season, when storms came and mighty oaks fell with thunder, the bamboo remained bending, swaying, bowing to the wind, but never breaking. Children played beneath them. Elders rested beside them, but few ever truly noticed them, except for one, a woman named Kaya, who had once lived in the heart of the city, but returned to her childhood home after everything she built her business, her marriage. Her dreams came crashing down in the same year. She arrived with a single suitcase and a silence heavy as winter. Every morning, Kaya walked to the bamboo grove. She didn't know why. She just needed to sit somewhere the world didn't expect anything of her. She wept there. Some days, other days, she simply stared at the sky. One afternoon, a storm arrived without warning. Rain fell sideways. The wind howled through the village like a grieving beast. Kaya ran, barefoot, unsure where to go until instinct led her to the bamboo. She crouched beneath their canopy, heart pounding, and then she saw it. The wind slammed into them, but they didn't resist. They bent so low they nearly kissed the earth, but they did not snap. They bowed. They yielded. And when the storm passed, they rose, not proud, just present. The next day, Kaya returned. This time, with a notebook, she began writing, not about the past, not about the pain, but about bending. She wrote of the weight she had tried to carry, all alone, of how her strength had been her pride and also her prison, of how she'd mistaken rigidity for resilience, and slowly, she began to change. She started saying, "I don't know," without shame. She forgave people who hadn't asked. She forgave herself. She allowed joy to return not in grand gestures, but in cups of tea, in birdsong, in long exhales. Months passed. Her neighbors noticed. She laughed more. She listened more. She was still healing, but she no longer needed to look strong while doing it. One evening, a child asked her, "Why do you always go to the bamboo?" Kaya smiled. "Because they taught me how to fall without breaking." Artsan lesson. We often think survival means standing tall, being unshaken, unmoved, unbent. But life is not something we win by resisting. It's something we flow with. To To be flexible is not to be weak, it's to be wise. The strongest trees may snap in the storm, but the bamboo sways and rises again. In your moments of chaos, ask yourself, can I bend instead of break? Can I bow instead of resist? Can I yield and still rise? Because sometimes, true power is not in holding on. It's in knowing when and how to let go. 14. The Sky Mender. There was once a boy named Arlen who believed he had broken the sky. It happened on a night when stars should have glimmered and the moon should have smiled down like a gentle parent. But instead, thunder cracked like angry voices, and rain fell in sudden sheets. Arlen had spoken cruel words to someone he loved, words that flew out of his mouth like shards of glass. And the moment he did, the sky darkened. He was just 8 years old. But he believed, with all the certainty of a child's heart, that his anger had torn something sacred, that the storm was not weather, but consequence. He spent the following days watching the clouds. He didn't speak much. He apologized. Yes, to his mother, to the trees, even to the sky itself. But the guilt did not leave. As the years passed, he grew. So did the silence inside him. Whenever he made a mistake, however small, the sky inside him seemed to fracture a little more. At 17, he left home. Not to run, but to repair. He became a wanderer. He planted trees where forests had been cut. He carried clean water to drought-ridden fields. He built shelters for lost animals and gathered fallen feathers with reverence, returning them to nests when he could. Maybe, he thought, if I help the earth, the sky will forgive me. But no matter how much good he did, when night came, he still saw that moment, the look in his mother's eyes, the storm in the sky, and he wondered if it would ever be mended. One day, after many winters, Arlen reached a mountain where people said the clouds came to rest. A monastery stood there, small, silent, shaped like a stone folded in prayer. He knocked. An old monk opened the door. She had eyes like riverbeds and hands like bark. "I want to fix the sky," Arlen said. She did not laugh. She only nodded and led him to a bench beneath a wind-swept pine. For a while, they sat in silence. Then she said, "Tell me what you think you broke." He told her everything, the words, the storm, the years of trying to undo something that could not be undone. When he finished, the monk looked up at the sky. It was dusk now. Faint stars had begun to appear. "Look," she said. "Do you see cracks?" He frowned. "No. And yet, you believe it's broken?" Arlen lowered his head. "Inside me. It is." She nodded. "Then that," she said gently, "is the sky you must mend." She handed him a bowl. It was cracked, split right through its center. "This was dropped once," she said, "but we did not throw it away. We sealed it with gold." Indeed, the fracture was lined with gleaming metal not hidden, but honored. "It is more beautiful now," she whispered, "because it carries its healing like a lantern." Arlen held the bowl, something trembling inside him. "You've been trying to erase your pain," she said. "But what if your healing isn't in undoing, but in carrying?" He looked at the sky again. This time, not for punishment, but for permission. To let the wound breathe, to stop fixing and start forgiving. Especially himself. That night, he slept beneath the stars, and for the first time in years, he dreamed without rain. Lesson: We all carry skies inside us, soft, vast, wounded, and sometimes we believe one mistake has shattered it forever. But the sky does not hold grudges. The stars do not close their eyes. Only we do. Forgiveness is not pretending we never broke. It's choosing to live with the gold of what we've learned. You are not what you said in a moment of pain. You are what you choose to become after. And the sky, it was never broken. It was waiting. 15. The lamp atop the mountain. Long ago, in a land where mist held the mornings like secrets, people spoke of a lamp that burned forever. It sat atop the highest mountain, a single flame, undisturbed by wind, untouched by time. They said it brought clarity to those who reached it, that its light wasn't fire, but truth. For centuries, seekers came. Some made it halfway, some turned back, some disappeared into the snow, chasing shadows of the summit. And then came Leora. She was not a monk, not a pilgrim, just a woman whose life had slowly dimmed. Her days were routine, her eyes tired, not from pain, but from forgetting why she began anything. One night, as she walked past the village edge, she saw the mountain lit by moonlight. Something stirred in her, not longing, not hope, just a question. Is there still light in me the next morning? She packed a small bag, a shawl, bread, water, and a stone her mother once gave her. She told no one, not because she feared judgment, but because this wasn't a journey of words. It was a listening. The path began gently, green hills, soft winds, songs of birds. But soon, the air thinned, the silence thickened. Trees gave way to stone, and stone to ice. Some nights, she doubted. Some mornings, she wept. Not because of pain, but because silence can be loud when you're alone with yourself. She met others along the way. A man who spoke only of scriptures. A woman who measured progress in steps. A boy who kept asking if they were almost there, but none of them stayed. They hurried past or turned back. Leora walked slower, not because she was weak, but because she had begun to see. The mountain wasn't empty. It spoke in the shift of wind, in the crunch of snow, in the echo of her breath. One evening, exhausted, she reached a plateau just below the summit. The final climb loomed steep, silent, sacred. And there, she saw it, the lamp, flickering, not bright, not blazing, but steady. She dropped to her knees, but something was wrong. There was no temple, no altar, no one guarding it, just a lamp on a flat stone, simple, plain. For a long while, she stared. She had expected more. Trumpets, revelation, a voice in the clouds. Instead, a whisper within her. What did you expect? She didn't answer. Why did you come? She placed her hand over her heart. To find what I had lost. The whisper replied, you never lost it. You only stopped looking. She leaned closer to the lamp, and in its flame she saw her own eyes, not as they were, but as they had been, alive, curious, full of sky. And suddenly, she understood. The lamp had never held the light. She did. The flame was a mirror, not of fire, but of faith. She stayed beside it until dawn, not guarding it, not worshiping, just remembering. Then, she stood, turned, and walked back down. She did not take the lamp, but she carried the light. Lesson. Sometimes we think our light has gone out, that we must climb far, suffer much, or seek something outside ourselves to find it again. But the flame never leaves. It waits. Not atop mountains, but beneath the noise. Beneath the layers we've built between who we are and who we pretend to be. You do not need to chase what you already carry. You only need to slow down long enough to see it. And when you do, the world changes, not because it is different, but because you finally remembered to bring your light with you. We've just walked through 15 stories not to listen, but to remember. Each one was a mirror, reflecting the gentleness, courage, and quiet light that already lives within you. Maybe you forgot how patient you once were, how soft your heart could be, how easily you once let go. But like the lamp atop the mountain, the light was never lost. You just needed a moment to see it again. If even one story touched something inside you, leave a sign, a like, a comment, or share which moment made you pause. And if your heart is asking for more stillness,